Alright, so this is the first part of building the Halo Reach sniper rifle. I have all my materials ready. We have various grits of sandpaper, a little saw I'm going to use to cut a PVC pipe, got gloves for later, and the palm sander. We'll get to that later. Right now, I have the parts I need kind of assembled here, and we're going to fit the length of the PVC pipe through them. There's two sections. There's the upper section, lower section. We're going to get the measurements for that. Cut it up, and then we'll see how we start piecing this together. So here we have the first section sort of skewered together on this 1/2-inch PVC pipe. We're just going to mark off the end right there and cut it up and see how it looks after. All right, here is where it ends for the length of the top section, but I'm giving myself just a couple more inches just in case I need some space or I need to change something, but I'll probably end up cutting that section off when I don't need it. Now, two things to note, in the files, there isn't a printed part for this lower section right here, so I'm left to assume that it's just the PVC pipe that is meant to be painted to resemble a smooth barrel, and it does seem to fit really nicely with this section, so I'm keeping it as is. And like, for example, these parts, they all have a little printed part that is supposed to just go over the top. But another thing to take a look at is inside the mag well. There isn't actually a wall. You can't quite see it here, but there's kind of about 3 inches in there before it actually hits the magazine or the clip. And from here, if you can get the light a little bit, it's just kind of hollow on the inside here. So what I'm doing is keeping the mag inside, and that is going to be my base measurement. This little quarter, or kind of, yeah, like a full inch section will be a part of that actual barrel length, and that should give me the rest of the depth there. That way, if I keep that just to the right length, this clip shouldn't bump into the pipe. It'll have that full like insert motion of the magazine. So I want to make sure that that is still functional by the time we glue all this together. So all I got to do now is probably mark right around here, trim that last little bit of pipe, and we should be set for that. One thing I just noticed as well, I believe the PVC will have a second section that goes between here, because this is for the bipod to kind of swivel. So I'm probably going to have to cut it into 2 separate sections and leave a gap right in there so we can have a smaller PVC just fit horizontally into that section. So I kind of just made an assortment of markings, but this end piece is where I will trim for the whole length, and then this is that little mid section I'll have to probably cut in 2 pieces so that we can fit it through the center there, and I'll just give that a shot and see how it turns out. If not, we have just enough PVC left. I should be able to make a second attempt if I need to. Maybe need to trim just a little section off so it fits better, but we now have a gap and we have a full length barrel not being impeded because it kind of ends just right there. Now all that's left to do is figure out how this will insert, measure that, and that's got a lot more space in there, so I wonder if I'll do something different. But once the brass rods show up for the bipod, I'll probably start working on that section and seeing how that pieces together so it can actually swivel and operate as a bipod. What I'll probably work on next is making this fit, because for some reason it just barely isn't big enough to slot into this little hole here. And another thing that's a little frustrating is that even though the files call for a 1/2 inch PVC, it just is bigger than that. It's not quite the same as this barrel, which just locks in real nice. So I don't know if I'll change anything for that. It took forever, but now we can swivel this and it fits into that slot how it should. So we will now be able to get the PVC pipe to connect between the two, and we'll figure out the bipod from there. It's time to do a little bit of sanding. So I got this piece of the scope, and there's a lot of, you can see the lines, we got to get all that out. One thing to note about any electric sanders like Dremels or the palm sander, if you're using them, if you put too much pressure and get too much friction, it's gonna start to melt the plastic. So you gotta kind of go lightly. I'm probably gonna use this Dremel to get these little bits here, and we'll see how that turns out. Any parts that I feel like aren't coming out well enough with just the electric sander, I usually just go back to hand sanding because I feel a little more confident in not just melting all the plastic bits. And remember, with Dremels, you always go with the direction of the rotation, never go against it. So you want to kind of brush it, don't go fighting it, or you might kind of get that bit of friction going and it will melt the plastic. So after hitting with the 220 grit, you can see it's not perfect, but it's a lot smoother, at least to the touch, and all the rough edges were taken out. So now we're gonna go a little finer, probably bump it up to somewhere in like the 500-600 range, and we'll see how it looks after that pass. So this is how I do most of my sanding. I just get the grit I want and then a little sanding block, and I just do it all by hand. Obviously there's still little bits of imperfections here and there, but most of that could be filled with like a filler primer or just any kind of paint later on, and it could be resanded. And then you can move all the way up to wet sanding, wet grits at like in the thousands or so. It just depends on what you're going for. And for this one, I'm okay if it is a little grittier. I don't need it to be perfectly smooth for the whole piece. So I'm gonna move on and start sanding the rest of the pieces. We got all of this to kind of sand through. You can tell I've done a little bit already, but I need to finish up the rest here. Okay, so I've sanded all the parts and they're pretty smooth. Not really anything else to touch up on them. So now it's time to assemble them, glue everything together, and we'll move on to the painting process. With anything sanding, the more time you spend on it, the better it's going to turn out. So just take your time if you want a good product. All right, so here's the next challenge. Right now we're looking at piecing together the bipod. The bipod has all these little holes that are designed to fit a 1/4 inch brass rod. So that's what I got here. This is the 1/4 inch. Unfortunately, the 1/4 inch does not actually fit the full size files. I don't know if that is just something that my printer wasn't able to do, but it just is barely too wide without somehow sanding the inside of here, which I don't have any good tools to do, so I'm not gonna do that. Instead, what I went and did is I got the 1/4 or the 8 inch, wait, what is that? The 1/8 inch brass rods, and those do fit inside with a little bit of space. But filling that with some super glue shouldn't be an issue. And then up here, it actually still fits kind of the base here. So what this is meant to do is you stick this with the reinforced brass rods into this little swivel here, and that I'm going to just kind of melt into the PVC here, which will finally allow that to fully rotate and be a deployable bipod. So that is the next task. Probably going to have to cut off a very small section of this, get that to fit all the way down, then cut off this part of the brass, so we have a length there, and this part of the brass will have to be melted into the PVC. So that's what I'm gonna work on right now. In the future, what I'd love to do as well is make this same prop, but out of brass. So if I find some way where I can braze this brass and bend it, and also attach lengths of it so it can physically be this little support thing, then I can hook that and have a really sturdy way to hold the sniper rifle. That's not going to be this flimsy plastic that will most certainly snap if any pressure is actually applied to it. So I'm deciding I don't like having to pick between a 1/4 of an 1/8 brass rod that fits too well and is loose versus a 1/4 inch brass rod that just doesn't quite fit. So what I'm doing, I'm going back into the program and I'm just gonna scale up to 107% of what the bipod is. Now that might run into some issues when we start to actually put it into the little, I guess, bipod mount, but hopefully we can kind of just squeeze it in there. And the important thing is that we have a sturdy 1/4 inch brass rod the way it was intended to be, rather than a flimsy one that I'm just feeling is not going to be structurally sound enough for what I want. So I'm going to try reprinting this and seeing if that fits, and then seeing if that's worth doing over kind of makeshift sticking a smaller one. So we'll check that out. So here are the reprinted legs. They actually fit the 1/4 inch of the brass rod, unlike this other version. So I had to use my white PLA, but it's all fine. It's all gonna be painted anyways, so at least it looks kind of cool, stands out with the white. The only subtle issue which I saw coming was that it doesn't fit into the normal sized rotator cuff. So I either sand that down so it can kind of sit in there. At least the brass rod fits, but I'll still have to make a slight adjustment so that we don't have this gap here. So now we're gonna use some JB plastic bonder to just glue everything together. Just slowly working up the whole length here. Let's see how it goes. Here we are applying the goop, being extra careful to make sure it's nice and aligned. Right now I think it's right there, but it's just setting right now. I'm gonna let this piece set for at least the 6 minutes before I start putting on too much more. I don't wanna get it all loose. Beep. Will you be paying with cash or card? So I'm using science to build the gun, try to keep it together, because this piece wants to kind of not be flush. I'm not sure quite why, but at the same time, I'm gonna have to squeeze this one together because you can tell it's wanting to come apart. So we're just gonna hold this bad boy for about 6 minutes straight and see how it turns out. This takes a lot of patience, just holding the pieces in place until they can set, and making sure it's aligned properly so we don't have to backtrack too far. Coming along so far. I think I'll let this set overnight and then I'll keep working on it later. Here we're gonna glue the scope on and we'll see how that goes. Looking good. Working on the barrel now, getting pretty close. Just painting it on. This JB Weld stuff is amazing. We're gonna let that set probably overnight, and then I'll keep working on the bipod in the morning. Here I've just glued the bipod, at least the brass rod in for the bipod, and it kind of moves independently. The only thing I need to figure out is where or how I keep it to not move so much. I need more friction in this system so that the blades don't just kind of flop everywhere. Here's how one of the bipod blades looks. I'm probably gonna get a bunch of the JB Weld around there so it holds nice and tight. And then it's split into 2 parts so I can fit it on my printer. We got one steel rod or one brass rod in there, and then another one right here, but I'm gonna have to cut that down to size so that this foot can sit right here. So I'm gonna chop that in half now with a little hacksaw. All right, let's see how we did. Oh, just a little short, so we'll trim that off too. There we go. Nice and solid, no gap. And that is the bipod fully assembled, letting that super glue kind of dry. The entire rifle is done, except for this little holding handle, which I'll probably figure out how to do that with actual brass, because this is just way too flimsy, it's not going to support anything. We'll see how I can do that, but we're going to let this cure overnight, and later, once I get some more JB Weld, we're going to go over all the seams, probably touched up with some more finer sanding, and then fully prepare for paint. So here I'm going over all the seams with more of the JB Weld plastic bonder, just making sure I can kind of clean up all those gaps and reinforce all the weld lines. All right, we have done an extra sanding pass, got everything pretty smooth. There's still just little bits that maybe I could touch up more, but I think I like where it's at, and with the paint, it should come out looking really nice. We're gonna start with Montana Gold primer in a white color, and that should help all the rest of the neon colors kind of pop a little bit more done. And we'll see how this turns out. Always make sure you do a little spray test before. Sit the can upside down. Looking good. And what we're going to be doing is doing light coats, very light. We want to keep it about a foot apart the whole time. Nice and even. We're just going to go once, let that kind of dry for a bit, and then probably do another pass, and then we'll probably flip the gun here. Let me get my mask on. All right, we're ready. First pass. Now the nozzle, that's a weird direction, so I'm probably gonna go sideways. I'm gonna come from this direction. I think that's gonna spray a little more evenly. I think I like that, so let's try that way. Yep. I'm kind of going at an angle here. All these little corners and stuff. Now I know most people prefer to spray paint each individual piece. I kind of like doing it assembled, but whatever works for you. Honestly, it might be easier to do it every single piece because I don't have to worry about getting into the cracks. But yeah, I mean, this is my method, so try it if you like. So that's the first main coat. You can tell it's pretty light. We're gonna let it set for just a second, maybe like a minute or so, then we'll do a second coat. This time maybe a little bit thicker so we can get it fully coated. You notice is unique about Montana versus Rust-Oleum, which is what I've usually used, is that they keep these at a really low pressure, so you can see just how fine this stream is. And I think that just allows for a really nice light coat, because usually people really overdo it with spray paint and it just gets splattery and everything, but I'm seeing pretty much zero splatters. It's really coming out clean. I kind of been digging this brand. I might use it more often. Okay, there's the third coat of primer. We're gonna let that sit for a bit, then we'll flip it over and we'll use this second can on the other side. And that is the other side finish. So we have coater on everything with 3 layers. It's getting dark now. I'm gonna let this dry for a second, then I'm gonna go back through really quick, make sure there's no spots I missed. If I did, I'll just hit that with a little bit more primer, and then we'll let this set for a full day, and we'll keep painting tomorrow. Right here is an example. I should probably get just a little more primer through those little corners, and I can see a little bit of speckling right there, so touch up with those areas, and then I think it'll be good. So here I'm in the process of taping out some areas that I don't want to be painted black right now. I want to keep some of these bigger areas just more exposed to the white primer, because we're going to put some nice vibrant neon colors on them. I'm not going to tape off every single area, because a lot of these really small sections, it's just going to be a pain in the butt to kind of get all the tape in there. It's going to take way too long, so instead a lot of that I'm going to be hand painting, but some of these bigger sections I do want to spray paint. So to put on the tape, I just kind of thickly cover it, and then I score it with my blade, and that allows you to just easily peel off each little section. Of course, you can lightly score it. You don't need to go very deep with the cut. And once you get that, you can round off those corners really nicely, and you'll have a nice covered piece. This is kind of how the first coat's looking. Got a really cool little translucent effect there. I like that. But it's all going to be black in a second, so it won't matter. So here we are the next day after the paint's dried. Now, a couple issues. First of all, I underestimated how much paint I'd be using. I used 2 cans, which I thought would be enough because 2 primers was enough, but I definitely needed 3 because there's a lot of spaces that I could not fully cover. You can clearly see white, and basically any part that is kind of this rough spot is just undercoated. It was more dusted than actually coated, but there were spots that were good, like kind of right here in the middle. This is pretty nice, and you can really see how that extra paint could have been helpful in areas like this where we got it good. You can see it's pretty smooth, but then those rougher lines, they just stick out like a sore thumb. So I ordered some more paint. We're gonna redo that part, all those sections that we missed. But the second thing that I'm trying to consider is I had this gray color, which doesn't feel as gray as I had hoped. It's almost like this earthy brown, and I wanted to paint the barrel that color, but I don't know anymore. I feel like it kind of clashes. So I'll think about that for a second, maybe stick with that color, maybe try something different. But for now, what we're gonna do is take off the paint, or the tape here. We're gonna get the neon colors on, and then we'll be able to recover any, or touch up any places that we missed with the extra black paint, and that should turn out pretty nice. All right, we're taped off for our next coat of paint. We're gonna get some blue on the tip, and pink, and just a couple other things. So this is gonna be tricky. They sent me a defective can. This one was already sprayed and kind of used on shipment, so it kind of just leaks. So it might be a little messy. Luckily, we're only painting small details. What I'm probably going to do is I'm just gonna spray paint the tip, and then some of these other parts, I think I'm just gonna hand paint them with the paint that's in this can, because this is not gonna work out very well. What a mess, dude. But it's blue, good enough. Despite the mess of blue, we were able to get the colors on, at least the main ones I want to spray paint on. All the rest, I'll mostly hand paint because they're such fine details that it'll probably be easier to do that way instead of taping everything. I'm looking into getting a replacement can for this one because I don't even know if I'll be able to use it to get spray paint out of it, but we'll find out when that comes here. And once we finish getting all those, or once this finishes drying, we're gonna get another layer of the black, and then we'll paint those hand details and add some final touches and weathering to the gun. So we're getting really close. Okay, so we're on to the next step of painting. I'm gonna add some gray to the undersides of the barrel, and then this little accent piece right here, and as well as clean up the magazine. And then once that's done, we can finally recoat the whole black once that shows up here soon, and another kind of black. And then we'll add finer details of little splashes of color here and there. I'm gonna hurry and work quick though, because this is cooking in the sun right now and I don't want it to get too hot. So we're hitting it one more time with another coat of black, and it's looking a lot nicer now. Definitely cleaned up all the rough patches. You can see just how much smoother it's gonna turn out, and I'm looking forward to the finished product here soon. So I have a little bit of the spray paint just in the plate, and we're adding all the tiny details, like putting some blue in between these little circles to make it kind of pop out. Here's all those little details done. On to the next side. With the paint all dry and the gun pretty much ready, I'm going to add some extra details, like making the scope. So I cut out this circle for the scope. It's made out of plexiglass. We're gonna put some red window tint right over the top of it. Nice. Now we're just sticking these in with hot glue. And we're set with there. So right now I'm working on functionality of the magazine. After painting, it kind of became too thick to slide in nice and smooth like it did before, which is kind of what I expected, but I'm taking advantage of that now. I'm actually roughing up the mag, and I really deeply sanded the inside of the mag well so that it can still slide smooth, and it has this magnet to keep it in place, but now it's going to have this cool roughed up texture as if it had seen just a lot of usage throughout the war or whatnot. So I've been working on a couple solutions to get the bipod to be deployable and undeployable. I've been using a magnet solution before, just to kind of let it snap into place, but the magnets would keep on shearing off. There just isn't enough space between here. So for now, the solution is just a little strip of Velcro that I can let it sit in its lower accurate position, but then when I need to deploy it, I can just kind of move it down into a deployed position and it will hold pretty firmly. So it's not the prettiest solution, but it does work. It's pretty effective. It just adds that friction it needs to the system, and it will do for now.